I'm Afshin Rattansi, and we're going underground on the 2-year anniversary week of then CIA boss Mike Pompeo vowing to take down Wikileaks as its Vault 7 revelations uncovered CIA covert hacking of smartphones and web browsers all around the world. Coming up on the show.
How wish you were here, Julian.
Us and Them, legendary Pink Floyd frontman Roger Waters on the powerful forces seeking to crush the world's most famous publisher, Julian Assange. And today, as the working classes of EU superpower France demonstrate against neoliberalism in the streets of Paris on their 50th act of defiance, we speak to a co-founder of the Gilets Jaunes about the thousands dead or injured. All this and more coming up in today's Going Underground, but first straight to our continuing coverage of UK solitary confinement of the world's most famous publisher, Julian Assange. Joining me from New York is legendary Pink Floyd frontman Roger Waters. Roger, thanks for coming on the show again. First, your reaction to Britain or British authorities denying clemency for Julian Assange.
I'm flabbergasted and horrified in equal measure. The proceedings a couple of days ago in that Magistrates Court were nightmarish. For that to be happening in an English courtroom makes me thoroughly ashamed of being an Englishman. I can't believe that they're proceeding with it. As we all know, in the extradition treaty between the United States and the UK, it is not applicable to any political crime or complaint. So I don't know on what other grounds they're trying to extradite Assange, but it is clearly a put-up job, and they're clearly trying as hard as they can to kill him. Julian Assange is becoming a warning to other journalists that if you tell the truth, particularly to power, we will get you. And that is the message that is being transmitted.
Well, it didn't even make the evening news bulletins here.
Well, you know, I was there on October the 2nd. I set up with John Pilger on a little stage outside the Home Office, and I sang my song, Wish You Were Here, and I made a speech, and John made a very good speech to the assembled 1,000 or so people, and Julian's brother spoke to them as well, and there wasn't a single word in any of the Western media of a report of that protest. And it was a serious protest, completely ignored. So, yeah, we're getting a very, very one-sided narrative here. What they've taken in so far from the smear campaign about his cats or the allegations in Sweden or blah, or this or that or the other, none of which are substantive in any way, as we know. They're a smokescreen to divert our attention from the fact that he's being railroaded by the United States government, as I said before, as an example to others, to scare the out of any other potential journalist who might stand up and speak the truth about war crimes and other things that our governments do not want to be reported. They want to keep all that stuff secret. And Assange is one of those essential publishers, and there are precious few of them, which is why he is so precious to us all, who are prepared to take the risk of actually reporting the reality of our lives to us, to we the people, which is our right to know. And they are applying the heaviest possible penalty they can for him stepping out of line and doing his job as a journalist.
You were outside the Home Office with John Pilger, as you said. He came on the show. He was visibly shocked about the appearance of Julian Assange hardly being able to speak. You think that you just said they're going to kill him?
But they are killing him. I wasn't in the courtroom 2 days ago, but I've read Craig Murray's account of what happened in the courtroom, and Craig Murray was devastated by what he saw. They're friends. They're quite close friends. But he said, you know, he's lost over 2 stone in weight. That's like 15 kilos or something he's lost. He's balding at an alarming rate. But what's more alarming is the fact that even when they asked him his name and so on and so forth, he was stumbling over finding ways to speak. So they've been drugging him. God knows what they've been doing. Well, we do know that they've been keeping him in solitary confinement. So 23 hours a day, he's banged up in a cell. He is exhibiting all the symptoms, according to the accounts that I've read, of somebody who has been subjected to torture in a routine and way over many months. And he looks like people who come out blinking from the dungeon after they've been tortured for many months. And so you can see that he's very frail, and he is in real danger of them actually ending his life. Before they ever get to an extradition hearing. But the fact that they're even having one is disgusting beyond all belief. This makes an absolute mockery of the idea that we have a rule of law in the United Kingdom. Magna Carta might just as well not have happened. Because this just says, no, the law, the magistrates' courts and the law is actually just a tool for whoever it is who rules us all. In this case, the government of the United States of America. That's why they were in the magistrates' court, pulling Vanessa Barrister's strings, and she was responding like a puppet and doing everything that they wanted her to do and saying everything that they wanted her to say, with a bit of prodding from the QC, what's his name, James Lewis, who was representing the United States government in our magistrates' court. In our capital city, in our country, we have become such willing lackeys of the empire of the United States of America that we allow this to happen without there being a general uproar or people taking to the street. And of course, even when a few people do take to the streets, like John Pilger and I did 3 weeks ago outside the Home Office, it's not reported in a single newspaper or by any television channel anywhere on either side of the Atlantic, either in the United States or in the United Kingdom. Orwell and Huxley were always kind of arguing with each other about who had the closest, who had come up with the closest view of what the dystopia might look like in the future. I think we've got a lot of both, because we have the Big Brother Orwellian dystopian nightmare, which is quite clear to all of us, and it's happening. It happened 2 days ago on October the 22nd in that magistrate's court. Or Huxley, well, you only have to look out in the street and you see the people, the walking dead going by with their earbuds in, listening to God knows what, and taking absolutely no notice of the fact that this journalist is being murdered by our governments. And we walk by with our earbuds in. I only say earbuds because that's like the Soma now. The iPhone is the Soma. It's the drug. This is the opiate of the masses now. It's this attachment to clicking away on our iPhones as we walk, unthinking, unfeeling, uncaring through our lives, and allow this bullshit to take place in our names, in our courts, running fast and loose with our law, the law that should belong to us, the people, and it doesn't, sadly.
This channel did cover your demonstration and your rendition of which you were here outside the Home Office. Barrister,
I'm sure you did.
Barrister, of course, you're referring to is was the presiding judge. You and the UN may say he was tortured. The British government denies that he is being tortured. In fact, even rejected a request from Spain about questions via video link of CIA bugging. Last time on this show, you said that Lenin Moreno took an IMF bribe, which he denies, to release Assange from his asylum at the London Ecuadorian embassy. He's now fled the capital. Do you think he's getting some sort of just desserts in Ecuador?
Thank goodness for that, He fled the capital, I have to say as well, in the wake of him then making the announcement that he decided to give their national park away to Chevron so they could destroy it, extracting oil. in the same way that they did in Lago Agria, which is the area of Ecuador that I went to look at some of the 1,000 waste pits that Texaco left there in the wake of their drilling operations between 1961 and 1993. What a stark contrast between the presidency that elected to give political asylum to Julian Assange, and Moreno, who had him removed from the Ecuadorian embassy in London by special branch and so on, is graphic and terrifying. But it's a picture that is happening all over the world. It's happening there. It's happening obviously in Ecuador. I've been speaking to my friends in Santiago over the last few days. So it's happening in Chile, in Santiago, because Piñera was re-elected president. I remember Mr. Piñera from when I was there during the wall, before he was booted out the last time. So now every day there's a curfew, the military on the streets. This is standard. This is going back to Pinochet. This is classic neoliberal, neo-fascist. How do you contain the people? Shoot a few. They'll come to heel. So now, thank goodness, the people of Chile are saying no. And every night at curfew time, they're banging pots, leaning out of their windows, and they're banging on tin pots with spoons, and they're singing Victor Jara's famous song about the path to peace. So I feel a tiny kind of surge of pride in those people who are resisting this neo-fascist governments and presidencies that are springing up. So there's Bolsonaro in Brazil, there's Piñera in Chile, there's Moreno in Ecuador, and so on and so forth. And the places, obviously, where the people have managed to maintain a grasp on the reins of power, like Venezuela, are under huge attack from the United States of America to try and disrupt that and impose another neo-fascist dictatorship on the country, i.e. Guido, who it seems now as if that wave may have passed. But it's very difficult for countries to survive because of institutions like the IMF, which is just an arm of American imperialism. Anyway, that's the way I see it. But, but go on, Chile. You fight back. I've met Piñera. I had an hour-long meeting with him in the presidential palace when I was there, because at the time there was student unrest, and they were killing them in the streets. They had the army out there and they were shooting them, and the streets were littered with spent tear gas grenades and rubber bullets and live ammunition as well. And when I said to Piñera, I questioned him about that. I said, why are you killing these students in the streets? You know, don't you think it's a bit heavy-handed? He said he looked me in the eye and he said, there have been 1,200 injuries reported in the unrest and blah, blah, blah. And of those, 1,100 were to policemen. And I thought, you've got to be kidding me. And obviously, he was kidding me. But that's the level upon which they work. They just lie. They look into the camera and or into your eyes, and they lie to you. Because the people in Santiago know what's going on. The people understand what's happening.
We obviously invite the ambassadors of all the countries you just mentioned on this show, especially the Chilean one about the Cacerolaza. Roger, I'll stop you there. More from Roger Waters after this short break. As the revolutionary Gilets Jaunes movement fights police brutality and EU neoliberalism in the streets of Paris today, we speak to one of its leaders. All this and more coming up in part 2 of Going Underground. Welcome back. I'm still with legendary musician and artist Roger Waters. In the past few days, Bernie Sanders, running for the 2020 presidential campaign, he's said, I know you've tweeted against his policy on Venezuela. The EU, I should add, still recognizes Juan Guaido as the leader of Venezuela. Bernie Sanders, though, says if he was president, he won't be prosecuting under the 1917 Espionage Act. Sign of hope?
Any movement away from where we are now is a good thing. So I don't have a great deal of faith in the Democratic Party in the United States of America. But having said that, I have a lot of faith in some of the young congresswomen who are there now. And so I see that AOC has just endorsed Sanders officially. 2020 is going to be a monumental year in American politics, and we can all absolutely accept the fact that American politics affect us all. They do, and their foreign policy affects everyone in the world in a very negative way at the moment, but it might be that if they get a more progressive system of government in the United States, they may stop being able to affect the world in a positive way. I'm sure Sanders is a good man. All he was doing about Venezuela when I berated him was he was trotting out the mainstream media mantra about the dictator Maduro and the shining light Guido and blah, 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 which was complete nonsense, as has been shown and as we all now know. So that was just him being ignorant and not taking the time, not bothering to take the time to actually speak to people on the ground and find out what was really going on in Venezuela and what the Venezuelan people actually think about the Bolivarian Revolution and about the legacy of Hugo Chavez. They are deeply, deeply attached to it. You have to remember that before that, they lived in a post-colonial system of rich people and slaves. I wrote an opera about the French Revolution a number of years ago, and there's a line in it, in a tenor aria, and it says this. It says, "Tears like falling rain slake the thirst and douse the flames, and cooling in the crucible, an idea forms, a nugget of belief in the hearts of the poor, that maybe in the dawn's new light, they have a right to the law." Well, that's kind of central to the way, you know, I believe in human rights, and I believe that all people, whether rich, poor, black, white, brown, Muslim, Christian, whatever, this, that, the other, it doesn't matter, have a right to the law. And so does Julian Assange. And his right to the law is being denied by a masquerade, by a kangaroo court in one of the oldest supposedly civilized cities in the world, London.
WikiLeaks, of course, revealed so much information about the lies told by the powerful in Latin America, and also revealed the Clinton emails. Clinton, of course, destroying Sanders' attempt at the presidency in 2016. Now Hillary Clinton's claiming Tulsi Gabbard is a Russian asset. Is she a Russian asset? Is Julian Assange a Russian asset? Are you a Russian asset? What's going on with that?
Well, it's just rubbish. The whole Russiagate thing was always absolute nonsense from start to finish. The idea that a government or another might interfere in the election of a foreign country, well, obviously they do. I mean, look at the history of the United States of America in the last 100 years. They've done nothing but interfere in other people's governments. Often they just do it with assassination or force, or they go in with and buy it. You know, the best way, as we all know, to subjugate a people is to lend them money. To identify Russia as an enemy of America is exactly the kind of diversion that Hillary Clinton and the other warmongers in the Democratic and the Republican parties, that's exactly the diversion that they need, so that the people of America don't look down and suddenly go, well, hold on a minute. The gap between those of us who need help, who need health care and so on and so forth, and the ones who live in the iCloud up in the sky, who the multi-billionaires, the gap is absolutely unacceptable.
Well, just back to Julian Assange.
I've got
for a second. You're going to write to Prime Minister Boris Johnson and maybe get the Prime Minister to exercise clemency on his extradition to the United States?
Boris Johnson? Are you kidding? I did write last year when I was engaged in in moves to get some children out of Camp Rouge in northeastern Syria. And I did get them out in the end, but I wrote to the Foreign Secretary, who was Hunt at the time. He didn't even reply. Now, that is really weirdly bizarre, because within the context of a government in the United Kingdom, at least you would expect the Foreign Secretary to have an office with a secretary who could reply, "Dear Mr. Waters, thank you for your letter, off," or whatever. I didn't even get, not even the courtesy of a reply. Boris Johnson wouldn't be, unless it was a photo op for him, he wouldn't give it, he couldn't care less what I think about anything, or what anybody thinks about anything. You've got to remember that Boris Johnson is an old Etonian. They are taught at school that they're special. They're taught at school that they're exceptional and that they have a kind of moral duty to lead, because they've been born to it, first of all, otherwise they wouldn't be at Eton, and then they've been educated to rule, and it's it's an obligation. Boris Johnson believes this. I'm quite sure he does. Man's a buffoon. I wouldn't waste my breath on him.
Roger Waters, thank you so much. We'll obviously invite the now backbench MP, Jeremy Hunt, former Foreign Secretary, on the show. Roger, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Not at all. I'll buy you a drink when I'm next in London.
I'll take you up on that. Well, today, Europe's working classes take to the streets of EU superpower France in the Fifth Republic's longest protest since the Second World War. The Gilets Jaunes mark their 50th act of defiance as they face police brutality and a global media that has all but given up reporting on them. Joining me now from the French capital is Priscillia Ludosky, co-founder of a movement that brought a president to heel. Priscilla, thanks for coming on Going Underground. Tell me how many people have been injured. I understand 11 dead in the Gilets Jaunes protest. Act 50 today.
The strong use of the defensible launcher, which we ask for this being not used, but France is among the few countries in Europe still using it. We have around 24, 25 people that lost their eyes. That there have been 5 people who lost their hand, has been ripped off.
How many have been killed?
I don't remember the exact number. I know that with 25 people who lost eyes, 5 people who lost hand, over 2,000 people hurted. So,
but President Macron may support the use of LBD weapons. Even the European Court, though, agrees with Macron. Why do you think European justice systems say it can be used on your Gilets Jaunes comrades?
That's not what we heard about that. Out of European Commission, like ONU or Amnesty International, they said to France to stop it. So why European Commission asked the contrary, we don't know. Another question we have for France is why Europe says that the police cannot investigate on the police, and we don't have any independent organ who investigate on police blunders. When you have a strong protest in a country during almost 1 year, you have to give political response and not repression response.
Isn't this a European Union problem? Do you have sympathy with President Macron? He wants to increase the budget, maybe stop austerity in France. The European Commission says they must stick within neoliberal budgets.
What you can see during Yellow Vest Assembly, when you have debate about all the role of Europe and the role in France in Europe, what we can see is that in France we don't have, or maybe in other countries who are in Europe, we think that we don't have the possibility to decide. That's why Macron said that the referendum on citizens' initiative is anti-democratic, because they don't want us to be part of all that. because the measures they put on countries who be part of Europe, it's not fair. We do not trust politics, actually. We do not trust the government because they don't care about what we want, actually.
But Gilets Jaunes leaders were invited to the Élysée Palace. What is the state of negotiations today between Macron and the Gilets Jaunes? We
have been invited by the First Minister in December. And the reason why we refused is because the people working for him asked us to, to enter in a private entrance behind, not in public. So it's a really strange way to invite people, I think. So we said no just because of that. We are not against talking, just against the way they organize things. And the first thing we want to say is that we have an online platform of claims which received 1 million votes on 25,000 proposals made by citizens and completely ignored by the government. And the question we can have sometimes is a president of a country have a really power, or is just listening to the European Commission?
Our cameras will be there for Act 50, Gilets Jaunes. You met with the Catalan National Assembly a while back. What do you think about the alliance between the European Commission, European authorities, and the Spanish government now, which has jailed democratically elected politicians in Barcelona?
I've been in Barcelona at the very beginning of the movement because we wanted to understand why they couldn't organize a referendum. The referendum is a democratic tool. We should be able to use it very often to ask the population what they want, but it's not possible. And we wanted to understand why it wasn't possible over there. So we now, personally, I understand what's happening in Barcelona, and I think it's very normal to go on the street, to go in the street and to demonstrate about this unfair situation.
In Spain, they're talking about a return to fascism, British-backed dictator Franco. In Chile, they're talking about Pinochet. It's not fascism in France, though, is it?
No, I don't think so. Of course, you have different politicians who wanted to talk about the movement, say, okay, go on the street with us and try to take up the movement. But people know that this is a basic citizens movement, not political. The president made a big debate. It's a campaign and not, and this is not a real debate. It cost 12 millions to France. This is the only thing they should see.
Can you understand why people in Britain might want to support Brexit?
Yes, I can understand, because they do not consider that the country has struggled to solve.
Priscillia Ludosky, thank you. That's it for the show. We'll be back on Monday when we go to Kabul to ask Afghan leader Abdullah about being leader of a nation where innumerable civilians and more than 10,000 British soldiers have been killed or wounded since Tony Blair's invasion. Until Monday, keep in touch via social media. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.